Hey, everybody. Here we are, Business Roundtable Podcast. We've got some OGs in the house. We've got Bill Hatch. Welcome back, Bill. Glad to have
Thank
you.
Glad to be here.
Charlie, we haven't had you in a while. So
Yes, sir.
the force is
Good to
with
be
you.
back. Thank you.
And Doc C is back with us.
Hello.
So we're excited to have you guys back. So if you're listening to us for the first time, the Business Roundtable Podcast, we do have rotating guests on the podcast. Although I say Bill, Charlie, and Doxy have been with us on multiple podcasts, including the last one we just did on the 48 Laws of Power with Bill and Doxy on there. So glad to have you guys back on this one. And so I was talking with you guys, and particularly you, Charlie, about some of the tools that I use in my coaching program, Giant, as a Giant guide. And one of those ones we're going to talk about tonight is called the Support Challenge Matrix. And so one of the things I think all of you guys have talked about in previous episodes, we've talked about leadership. We've talked about how do we show up, as I like to use the term, kind of that liberating leader, empowering person, right? Each one of us have shared insights from our different perspective. You, Bill, as a leadership guide and ethics. Doc C, from your experience in mergers and acquisitions and getting folks in there, and Charlie, from your IT world and working with project managers and clients. And so what I thought we would talk about today is this challenge in specifically leadership, that managing diverse teams and getting these strategic goals and navigating all these complex business environments is, how do we do that in a way that provides both support and challenge? It's not either or, but it's a both. And so how do we know our tendencies in this way of, do we tend to show more support? Do we tend to show more challenge? And so that's where we're going to go in this episode. So those of you that are listening in, lean in. You're going to listen to some seasoned business owners and folks that have had experience working with teams here. And that's why I'm really glad all of you are here today as we look at this. So as I'm going to share the screen. So those of you who are listening, you're going to have to go back to YouTube or look at us on video so you can see this. But I'm going to describe this a little bit as an unpack it as we go into this. And share a little bit about that. And then we're going to get into some practical applications where I'm going to ask each of you guys here to share where you've had success or challenge, and where do you guys see yourselves in this spectrum. So let me pull up my screen here. And there we go. All right, we're getting techie with it here. On the screen, you guys will see a graphic where it is this matrix. And so it's a simple matrix, but it's a four quadrants there, right? And so we have our ideal state, if you will, that I think we all want to move to, like I said, being that liberated leader, of creating a culture of empowerment, opportunity. Doxy, we've talked about like this winning culture, right? Your book, how do we get to this place? We have another area of domination or dominate, where there's a place of culture of fear or manipulation. Another place where we have culture of entitlement and mistrust, we call protect, and we have abdicate in that other corner. So when you look at all of these things, you'll see there's a kind of an axis there where we have a place going from low challenge on our left to high challenge. That's kind of on that horizontal line, and then that vertical line we go from low support to high support. So that is kind of our diagram, if you will. That's what we're going to be looking at, and each of these have different leadership styles, if you will. And I think we would all agree we would want to be in this liberate place, but I don't think naturally most people don't just gravitate to that. They go to one of the other quadrants naturally, right? So when you guys look at this, I'll start with you, Charlie, first. When you just kind of look at this matrix and you see this laid out, what first jumps out at you?
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for bringing this to light,
Yeah.
David. I would say out of these four quadrants, what jumped out at me on my natural tendencies is the protect quadrant. I tend to be a protector. I tend to love supporting and being helpful and helping people, and maybe a little bit too much and coddling people, and uh, and so therefore low challenge, it not only discredits their capabilities, but it also sets them up for that culture of entitlement, that feeling of entitlement and mistrust, because I would then blow up, uh, when things I would basically, things would go wrong, and I would kind of bottle it in, and
Mm.
then so after so many instances I would blow up. It's like like a volcanic explosion. They'll be like, where'd that come from, right? So
Yep.
I was like, this is the 10th time you're doing this, but in reality I've never shared the first 9 times, so that really sets them up to not be able to trust me, and obviously I don't trust them because I'm bottling up my resentment and thinking that they're not capable. And so it's not only low challenge in the sense where I'm not challenging them to step up, but in my mind, in my own mind, I don't believe in them. Like I give
Mm.
them too little credit to their ability to go figure it out for themselves.
Mm. Charlie, real quick, I know, and I'm going to come to Bill next. I don't remember off the top of my head, but do you remember what your voice order is in the 5 voices?
That's a good question. I would have to pull it up if you can come back to me on that.
Yeah, we'll come back to you. Go back and look at that because I'm curious.
Okay.
I just want to compare and let people listen to that because I think the 5 voices tool is a really good tool to, again, use in conjunction with this. But Bill, how about you? When you look at this, how does,
Well,
what jumps out at you?
I have a lot of experience in the low support, high challenge quadrant of domination. I've done a lot of work in the auto industry, and fear manipulation is definitely king in auto retail world. It's it's at every level. Both salespeople to consumers, from managers to the hoi polloi, every combination you can think of. It's just a horrible toxic place to be.
So they're saying, hey, you got to make your numbers. You got to make this happen. This has got to happen. It's very high challenge, right? You're like, let's get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After 12 hours of working, you want to go home. Well, that makes you a half timer because there's 24 hours in a day.
There's 20. You're a slacker. Come on, dude.
Yeah. You're only working a half day.
Oh man. How about you, Doxy? Yeah. When you see this matrix laid out here, what jumps out at you?
You're probably gonna smile and laugh. I'm sitting here looking at this matrix, and I'm sure that because you guys are more intelligent than I am, but it's really the coordinate plane in mathematics, and that is in quadrant 1, which is Liberate. I mean, it's quadrant 1, and both X and Y values are both positive. And then when you go to quadrant 2, your X value is negative, which means that's a low challenge. And then, of course, your high is so that Y coordinate is positive. And then down below in that third quadrant, the culture, the apathy, and so forth, both are negative in mathematics. And then, of course, the third one, the dominant, is positive, and the Y coordinate's negative. It strikes me kind of interesting. I don't know who made this quadrant system. Did you make this, David?
No, this comes out of Giant, Doxy.
Okay.
But I think you're cluing in. The purpose of what I like about the Giant tools is they make them because it says a lot with a little. Like you're saying.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I just looking at each one of those quadrants. I mean, I don't know if your question is based on how I look at things, or because we could be in each one of these quadrants at any given time.
Absolutely,
for sure. But I think what is good for this this podcast and the people that are watching this is that just like the laws of power, you have to recognize where you're at, and what quadrant it is, and what leadership is kind of doing to you, and so forth and so on. I think it's fascinating, but at the same time, we could be in any one of these quadrants at any given time, especially when we're talking about culture.
Absolutely. Well, I want to. That's a great segue. Great job, Doxy. That's a great segue to my next follow-up question: is practical application of this, how we're going to do this. And Bill talked a little bit about this. Charlie, can I put you back on the spot again? I'm just curious. Were you able to find your voice order?
Not yet. I'm digging. There's just too many different places.
I can probably find it for you. I just remember. That's okay.
Cool.
So here's the thing I'll ask, because you mentioned this, Bill, a little bit. So I want each of you to look at this, and then we'll come back and get input on. But look at, like you said, Doxy, you're going to have a natural tendency. So Charlie, you said your natural tendency is to fall probably more into the protect quadrant. You're providing more high support than you are high challenge.
Correct.
That's as a connector voice. That's my primary voice in the 5 voice order. For those of you that haven't done that, you can go back to our previous episodes where we talked about the 5 voices or your voices in leadership, but using that framework. But as we go through this, I want each of you guys to look at where you have naturally showed up. And we're going to talk about challenges and successes there of part of that. One thing that you can do, and I can do this with clients, and Doxy, this is one I think I would love to do with your clients too, is that you can give them this, and this has been a very powerful tool. So if you want really honest feedback, is I would say give this to your team and like literally have them, zoom over here so you guys, let's see, you guys see my cursor here. There we go. So what you could do is literally print this out and like have your team go put a point a point here, where are you in the spectrum, right? Because you might think, yeah, I'm way over here on Liberate, but they may say, yeah, you're maybe over here, or maybe over here, or maybe you're way over here, So you could have them plot where are you right now, like you said, Doxy, where are you today? It could vary. But it would be an eye-opening experience, I think, if you guys were willing to do that, each one of us saying, hey, and anonymously, they're just going to point in there and you're going to come back. Because they did this, I've seen this with other giants do this, where the leader says, oh, they're all going to say, I'm great, I'm liberated. And they step out of the room and then they get everybody to plot them. And they're like, oh, I'm not as great as I thought I was. I'm not providing as much support or perhaps even challenge that I thought I was. So I'll come back around to you, Bill, first, and because you mentioned being in the auto industry, Bill, but I don't know, I don't get the sense. I want to get from you, what in your own words, where would you plot yourself?
Well, I think it would depend in some ways on the situation. There are times when a team doesn't need a lot of support. So, I could see, they're doing regular tasks. They're not, they're not particularly being challenged, so they don't really need the support. But and that happens from time to time. Yeah, I was doing some reading from Hersey and Blanchard, and about situational leadership, and I think in some ways the descriptions are maybe a little unfair in some cases, because there are going to be times when you're doing the same old stuff, and so you don't need the support. So you'll be in that abdicate quadrant, but you haven't really abdicated anything. You're just in that mode right at that particular time. That what you're doing, and there are going to be other times when they need lots of support, and even though it might not be a particular challenging time, but
well, I think if you look at this,
so
I think maybe if you say providing kind of the sweet spot, I don't know the sweet spot, but where you're providing enough of, like you say, Bill, maybe enough of the support. Maybe you don't need high support, right? But you don't, you just need like baseline support, right? It's not like you're removing support. Like I would say low support or low challenge means you're pulling away when it's leaving a gap when there actually needs to be enough there, a foundation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
A baseline. I think the baseline would be somewhere around here, and again, you're able to throttle, if you will, and move in a healthy direction. How about you, Doxy? What about you here? What's your natural tendency?
I have a question first, if you don't mind.
By all means.
David, have you actually used these 4 quadrants in your job or in your work?
This helped me. I'll get you my real world example. My real world example is it helped me give words to the understanding of how I naturally show up in high support in low challenge, or not providing challenge, meaning.
Let me be. I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me be clear. I wasn't really clear on my question. What I mean is that have you presented this to a group of people for a reason to get an outcome? I guess that's my question. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you brought this to the table, to this group of people, what were you? Can you give us kind of an idea?
Sure. So an example is when you have a leader that's frustrated with the team and the way the team's showing up.
Got it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
One way you can use this tool is, like I said kind of earlier, is allowing the team that you're working with to give you a snapshot into how do they see you showing up as the leader. Because you may think you're actually one thing and you're not. So here, in this case, this leader thought they were providing plenty of support to their team. In reality, they were very high challenge and very low support. And their team felt very demoralized, disengaged, and he wasn't getting the results that he thought he should be getting out of the team, because they just felt browbeaten. They just felt very discouraged. And so once he saw the eye-opening of, oh, this is how my team is seeing me, I thought I was communicating one way and it wasn't being received by the team.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? That's really interesting, and the only reason why I'm pointing this out, I'm glad that you clarified it, because every culture you could bring this to the table, and you would get so many different perspectives on where the leader and what quadrant they're in.
Yeah,
it's totally fascinating to me. I mean, I've given things like this to cultures as they through the mergers and acquisitions, and the opinions, if you will, of leadership and culture is just an eye opener. So I thank you for clarifying that, because I think that even our audience that are listening to this, it's good to understand how you'd actually use this in moving forward, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the goal, this is a tool. It's not the only tool in the toolbox, like you said, Curtis. But I think the goal here is, how do we help people become creating a culture of empowerment and opportunity, like your book, Winning Culture? This is a way to open up eyes and open up a dialogue and discussion,
right,
where we can help, mentor, help, cross-functional teams, and so somebody that, again, maybe showing high support, like I was showing high support for a team, but I wasn't showing high challenge, and it left a lot of people frustrated, honestly, because I weren't getting some people were really wanting more challenge, and they needed some more of that. And so I knew either I needed to, this is for me specifically, I needed to know my tendency, or in this case, I looked for other people on the team that were more high challenge than less important. Like, hey, could you give me some input here? Give me your feedback or perspective. And they were very clear with me, like, yeah, you know what? You're not clear on some things. Yeah, you're caught in coddling them and you're telling them these things, but they really need to have some clear points here for them to be successful and to win. And so it was humbling, but it was helpful for me to be a better leader. No?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Charlie, coming back to you, just some thoughts here. What's your, you mentioned earlier, but would you still say you fall on that protect quadrant is a natural tendency?
Yeah, that's my default. Like if I'm not being intentional about like just breathing belief into people and expecting them to step up and actually challenging them to step up.
Mhm.
That's my default modus operandi.
Right. So yeah, I think, just this, as we go through this, we're just using this as a way of understanding and how do we create this culture of, like I said, empowerment, opportunity. Why I like this is I really like your observation. Obviously, I never thought about it this way, but your idea of the positive, or positive, negative, positive, where that looks like when you're looking at mathematically.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think any of us want to be in a culture or a company that's abdicating, where there's low challenge and low support, where you have this basically people are checked out, you know?
Right. And
Right.
what's interesting about that, David, and this is why I brought this up really is, see, in the real world, we really live in quadrant one.
Mm.
I mean, and what's really fascinating about this quadrant one, the liberate rather, is that in quadrant one, that's where business is, because you can't operate a business in quadrant 2, 3, or 4
Mm.
because there's negative values in there. So
Mhm.
I think that the idea behind all of this is really to move into quadrants 2, 3, and 4 is to move into quadrant one.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
I
Yep.
mean, and that's what's so fascinating about this, because as Charlie mentioned, is yeah, we fall into these other quadrants.
Mhm.
Leaders do, cultures
Yep.
do, people, but ultimately, what we're really trying to do is stay in quadrant one,
Yes.
empowering people, creating opportunity. List goes on and on and on. But there are negatives. I mean, and that's why this grid that you have up here, this matrix, if you will, is really fascinating to me. I mean, I like it.
Mhm. Well, I think I agree we wanna go in this direction. I think of entropy, things are always breaking down, right?
Hmm.
And I think that there's this place of we're in a, um, there's a saying, there's a there's this there's nothing that stays stasis. There's nothing that just stays, like, doesn't change. It's either being built up or breaking down. So what I hear you saying, Doc C, is like, when we're intentional with our energy and our focus of providing high challenge and high support, this is where we create that synergy of what makes a lasting business and growth and organization. What happens is we take our foot off the gas on one or the other, whether we continue on with just high challenge starts to take over high support, or worst case scenario, both of those diminish. And I think we see this. I mean, how many of you guys have been to a business that it started, it actually might have been in this at one point, but it sunk into Abdicate. You're like, what in the world? I went to this business and I've thought of restaurants. There's other places where I've gone, and at one point I'm like, oh, this is the bomb. I love this place. And I go in there and I come in later and I'm like, what is going on? People don't seem to care. They're not engaged. The food is subpar. I'm using a restaurant. Food is subpar. Service is eh, you know. And I'm like, they've lost this, right? What have your guys' an experience there? Bill, I'll just go to you first.
Oh yeah. Well, it's actually really easy for a connected leader, a leader who's engaged with their people, who concerned about their people, I guess, to
Mhm.
slip into that low challenge mode, because they don't want to be hard on the people.
Mhm.
They don't want to be seen as a bad guy,
Mhm.
and so it's really easy to slip into that one. But I think most of those situations would probably slip into the protect mode, because those connected leaders still want to give a lot of great support
Mhm.
for their people. But yeah, I definitely the restaurant example is definitely relatable. Uh, as far as you go in one day and it's great, and you go in another day and it stinks.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of businesses that happens. Big box retailers fall into that category a lot because it's always the same thing. There are no new challenges to overcome anymore,
Mhm.
and there's no reason to support the people because everybody's concerned over their own jobs.
Mhm.
Um, and so a lot of these retailers, you go in and the employees just don't care. They don't give a darn about anything, and nobody expects much out of them.
Mhm.
Really.
Right. And it's a matter of time at that point where it will that where how long will the business survive?
Right.
I want to come to you, Charlie, next. So I want your input here, Charlie, from yourself and from your culture of the businesses you've worked in and participated in. So where have you seen like you talked about your experience of this, but when you need that high challenge, how have you found that, Charlie? How have you either brought it in yourself or had other people come in to augment that because you need that too in the culture?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first and foremost, it comes down to how your interpretation of the word challenge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because oftentimes the story that we have about the word challenge or the meaning that we add to that word is confrontation or
Mm-hmm.
combative, and that's not necessarily the case. And obviously, everybody has their own interpretation of that word. Like for me, I can speak for myself. I have a story of how um, like challenging people is like was like you're getting into a fight, so
Mm.
therefore um, the I guess peacemaking side of me wants to not have confrontation or what do you call it,
Yep.
contentious situations.
Yep.
But so that's not what it means at all. And in fact, I learned that challenge is one of the four languages of leadership. The other three being, vision casting, storytelling, and giving assignments. And
Mm-hmm.
so, knowing that that's one of the critical uh, leadership languages, then my growth path over the past years of, after having awareness of this blind spot of, having the tendency to coddle people and not um, set that high standard and cast that vision and challenge people to step up into what they're capable of, is that's been my growth path, is to learn how to challenge people and learn how to encourage and invite people to become more than and yeah, to become more than what they believe they're capable of.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like the word liberate in that quadrant, because it's not just liberating them to be fully self-expressed, but it also liberates you as a business owner to not have to run adult daycare. And so, so it's a win-win all around. And I like Doc C's mathematical approach that, yeah, that is the only quadrant that's positive, because every
Mm-hmm.
other quadrant has a negative. And well, I guess the negative, two negatives on the on the positive, but
Gotta.
I guess if you want to positively fail, then that's the quadrant that you want to live in. Yeah. So
That's right.
I want to come to you, Doc C, in a minute, but I wanted to touch bases because I did look up your voice
oh, you
order.
did.
Or,
Did you
so
find that?
yeah, your Pioneer connector,
Okay.
which I would say pioneers typically maybe go more in the high challenge, but what I'm thinking is you have a connector voice too, Charlie. So
Right.
because you're so connected oriented as your second voice, and
Right.
it's weighted there with pioneer. And candidly, if you're a pioneer, you're very you pioneers typically have high challenge, so they want to get there. However, if they get a lot of negative feedback, they might adjust their, and that's what you're talking about, Charlie, is you've probably
Right.
like maybe in the past naturally might have wanted it to be high challenge, but you've adjusted and leaned back more in your high support connector voice. And your
For
third
sure.
voice is creative, which is also very open and to new things.
Right.
And so you're probably learned, oh, I can actually build relationships better in the
Yeah.
high support. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. No, I've definitely been in that dominate quadrant, and
Yeah.
it's backfired because I literally made my employees cry, so um, without intending to, because I was just not, it just made them feel like nothing was ever good enough, so
Mhm.
um, I think that's what got me gun shy and retreated into the protect quadrant.
Right. Well, I want to come. So here's something I want to about Doc C, because this is something I think of mergers, acquisitions. Doc C, I would love to get your take on here, because I hear like, hey, we're bringing in a new CEO. They're going to turn the ship around, right? Things are not going the right direction. And I hear, in my mind, I hear high challenge, not necessarily high support, and you see a lot of sometimes fear, or what's going to happen to my job, where am I going to land? What's been your experience in that, Doxy? How could somebody that's coming into a leadership position like that, a CEO position or working in emergency, do it successfully to where they do provide challenge, but not in a way that neglects support?
Well, you just basically answered your own question. I mean, all of those things, fear, manipulation. I mean, there's just so many things. Humans, we just don't like change. So
Mhm.
when you have a merger, it doesn't matter. Call it ABC business and DEF business, and one's acquiring the other. It could be in the same industry, same everything, but the culture is always different. Why? Because humans are different.
Mhm.
We look at things differently, and so when it comes to a merger, you're automatically going to have a sense of fear
Mhm.
and even manipulation. And so that's why when going into a merger and something like this happens, all the checks and balances need to be in order, and systems. I always talk
Mm.
about systems. You've heard me talk about systems
Yep.
over and over and over again, and there's a reason for it. Charlie knows what I'm talking about. I know that Bill, you understand what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Systems are so important, extremely important, because it allows humans to actually adjust to the new leader. Not
Mhm.
once you have a system, but if you don't have systems in place, it's chaos. It really
Yep.
is,
Yep.
If you don't
and
have systems, you don't have a business.
you really don't.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you really don't. And once one business has their system and their way of doing things, and now when you start to acquire another company, you're going to put in these systems, and it just, it makes people nervous, and that's why if you just went from quadrant one to 2, 3, or 4 for sure.
Yeah.
Uh, especially if you are acquiring the company, it's you're in better shape, but as an employee or manager or whatever. But when it's the other way around, it's chaos for sure.
Mm, mm. Well, you just brought up a good point. In fact, I was just talking to a client about this today. Where we, we're talking about systems, processes, right? And we have this one company. They do a lot of. I work with biologists. They do a lot of field work, and one of the things they're challenged with is some of the biologists or the people are not getting to the field, or their starting their assignments in an appropriate time. There's leeway there, but they're not posting. So we're literally going through this process of how do we challenge them to be like, this is what's required, but yet at the same time support and communicate that message in a way that gets them engaged and understands why we need to be, again, moving into this liberate place. What happens is sometimes it's like, well, things aren't working, so we just kind of hit hard on one thing or the other. And so that's why it's, again, having a team and hearing from each other to push pull in this, to understand. That's why I love the 5 voices framework too, candidly. One of the things actually, just for you guys too that are listening and here, I just actually got certified on 5 voices for teams this past week, so I'm super excited about that. But there's a whole series of workshops I go in there about how do we use this, and this is just one of the pieces actually we do in there, because there's a lot to it. And we will then naturally tend to go to one of these or the other, and not necessarily always get in this liberate mode. But again, we can slip out of it. That's just said, where we can be here, like you said, Curtis. I think it's really important, everybody eye opening, that just you don't stay there. Unfortunately, we don't stay in any one of these quadrants. They can all be moved around. So don't just think, well, I'm here, I've made it. You could sink down. You could sink down in one way or the other, or down here altogether as a whole organization. So yeah, go ahead, Doc C.
Well, I was just gonna say I was just I relate to these things to sports a lot of the time, and if you take one of the best coaches in the game, which is the Alabama coach who just retired, Saban, and then you take the New England Patriots, Bill Belichick, that has yet to find a head coaching job. In both of them, they will say the same thing. See, they spend a lot of time in quadrant one. I mean, they spend a lot of time with great success, but both of them will say and have said that times have changed, and so has people. And so that's why when you go into a restaurant, 2 weeks ago and it was spectacular, and then you walk in today and it's chaos. Because things change, but what really is interesting to me is it the system that's changing, or is it the people that are relating to the system, and who's not adapting to the situation? If that makes any sense.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because I think that you have a system, and systems are extremely important, but at the same time, and I've said this in the other podcasts, is that the system has to be able to be there for humans to adapt and maybe change and grow. Actually, is a better word for it within that system. I don't know. It's just a.
Well, I'll give you an example, a real world example, since you brought that one up, Toxie. Using the 5 voices framework, there's one voice is called the Guardian. Guardians are very risk averse. They're very process oriented, very step by step. So they're very high challenge for the most part, Doxie, and that's very great, very, very much needed. But if you have, high support, but if not everybody is, or a lot of those people are, you have only a few of those folks, and they're pushing this, like, this is the system, this has to be done, but they don't feel supported. And this happened with me in another previous company where I was more the support side. Actually, I was trying to lean on this person in the organization, but they didn't value the support as much. They were very low. They were very much in this quadrant, right? And they didn't value support. They're just like, you should just get it. And I'm like, let's work together. I need you, you need me. But what happened was he was like, let's just keep the system. The system is this. The system. I got the best system in the world, but nobody wants to use the system. I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't really help us, does it? Everyone started to leave because they didn't feel supported.
That's right.
So the system is great, and we absolutely need it, and we can pour gas on the fire and have it roar if everybody's working together and they feel supported. But it won't do us any good to have the best system in the world and nobody use it, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the challenge. I think that would be a challenge too, that a lot of, I will say, from solopreneurs and other people that are in small businesses, they're trying to challenge, or trying to get everything just right too in a system. And I think that's great. But you also got to say, like, what is good enough? Where are we getting to where we can, challenge is good, but support and getting it out there? I mean, Bill, what did we just talk about in our book discussion, right? You have a really high threshold of your book, right? Like, really high. We talked to that with Bo, like all these things you want to do. I can believe how high Bill's challenge is, super high, but like, how do we get there? And Mo is giving you support, right? And trying to like get you to move on that. Just share briefly on that.
Well, I've been writing this series of books, and it turns out that I'm probably writing way too much, because there's a lot of information to give, and a lot of support that I want to give to the people who would be using my models, and but it may be that the challenge is too high. I may have gone a little overboard.
So it's like pulling it. It's still, we want the challenge, we want the support. It's just getting, maybe it's further over here. Sorry, my mouse moves over. maybe it's further right over here, not as much as we have, here quite yet, or, whatever.
Yeah.
We're plotting it, but we want to get you into that Liberate, not stuck down here, right? This is where you're going to really see that lasting impact.
Yeah.
Charlie, you want to chime in there?
Yeah, I was gonna say I have that tendency too, Bill, of getting into the weeds and wanting to go into every little detail on how to do something. But I've learned that to be high challenge, I have to learn to let go of that and learn to paint the vision, cast the vision, and let people know what needs to be done, like the objective, and challenge people to leverage tools to work smarter. Like, for example, our CEO challenged me to leverage AI in my role. And so obviously there's quite a few different AI note takers within Zoom. So I was able to leverage one of those, and it's made my life much better, and it allowed me to send summaries of our meetings instead of just having to manually sit there and manually type out a summary of what was discussed. So that's been a huge lifesaver. And then, continuing, like, internally, our integrator, if you will, if anybody of any of you in the audience or our panelists are familiar with the whole EOS model from the book Traction. So we do have an integrator person internally, where he invited me and challenged me to look into Power Automate from Microsoft, so that I can automate some of the routine tasks that I have and leverage Microsoft Copilot or just the AI that's built into the support that's built into the platform to help create those automation, as opposed to me trying to manually create the automation. So,
I mean, there's definitely ways. In Charlie, we probably have a whole nother episode on that to talk with you.
For sure.
In fact, this for those of you who are listening, we're having an episode released this week on incorporating AI into business. And so for those of you that we have different guests on all the time, so be sure if you're listening to this one, if you missed it, go back and listen to that one. We have a lot of great topics coming up here on the podcast episodes. So I do want to wrap it up here. I appreciate you guys' thoughts. I'm going to come to you, Curtis, Bill, and then Charlie for final thoughts here. But Curtis, you've really actually opened even my eyes and seeing this for the first time, seeing it with your fresh set of eyes. But what would you say is kind of a key takeaway for you, or those if you're looking at this, you would say, hey, consider this as you're leading, how you can be that liberating leader?
Well, I would say this, we're humans, we are fallible, and it's that simple. But don't take that as a negative. And I like these 4 quadrants. We recognize that if we recognize A, that we're fallible, and B, we're going to make mistakes. Don't be too hard on yourself, because your goal is to be the best that you could possibly be. And we need help with that. We need other people to actually tell us what our strengths and our weaknesses are. You can ask my wife. I tell you what, she's in the next room probably listening to this conversation, and she'll be the first one that says that I'm stubborn as stubborn can be, when she points out the mistakes, or shall we say the weaknesses, and I will butt heads with it until I sit back and I think about it for a while, and I realize, I was just an absolute dingling. So it takes time, and it takes a lot of effort to be the best that you can be, and that's it. I mean, most people will make excuses for not being the best, when in fact they should actually work their tails off for being the best. That's my whole input to this matrix thing.
That's great feedback, Doxy. I hear you being very coachable. I think that's the word I hear you saying.
Yeah.
How about you, Bill? Final thoughts here as we're wrapping up this.
Well, I think a visual aid like this can definitely help when you're using various feedback systems from your people. Just being able to say, oh, okay, so it's like, so they're feeling a little entitled and a little and a little with a little
mistrust
apathy there.
or
So a little mistrust there, a little apathy, and all. And so maybe we need to move the challenge up a little bit and see what happens. But use those feedback systems, whether they're surveys or what. What all else?
Absolutely.
To figure out where you are on this.
And I would say, and I'm gonna come to you, Charlie, in a minute, but I think like you also built, Doxy said, all of us here on this podcast, we're all here to help serve you. That's why we have this podcast. You reach out to any one of us, Doxy, Bill, myself, Charlie, leave comments in there because we will each respond to you. The whole point of this is to give you guys value, show that how we've learned and applying this, sharing with each other. So I appreciate you just suggesting that, Bill, to look at this. This is just a resource, but we're resources to you as well, and we would love to hear from you. How about you, Charlie? Final thoughts?
Yeah. So obviously, right now, based on this episode, the goal is to constantly bring ourselves to that quadrant of liberation or liberate. And so, just I think less is more, right? Like the more we complicate this, the more we're going to walk away from this session and this episode and be like, oh, that was just too much information, way over my head. So I would just boil it down to two things, right? Like number one, the high challenge is think big, right? There's a book, literally, The Magic of Thinking Big, and I'm always reminded of how Walt Disney determines what ideas to actually execute is if he's with his board of management or leadership team or directors or whatnot, and everybody is in agreement with something, then he says, okay, that's not the idea. If everybody opposes it, then he's like, okay, let's make that happen. And so that's high challenge, right? If you already know how to do it, then you're not setting the bar very high. And so that's number one. Number two is the high support. Just like humans, we need CPR to come back to life, to breathe life into your business, into your people. You need to operate from EPR, encourage, praise, recognize. And that's what the high support is. Encourage people to step up and be their possibility, right? Be what they're capable of. Praise the effort and the outcome that you want to see, and recognize it. And always recognize publicly, criticize privately, right? So the EPR and dream big. That's the takeaway.
Awesome, Charlie. I want to thank you, Bill, Doxy, Charlie, coming back on here. Always great to have you guys. Amazing thoughts, insights. For those of you that are listening to this, go find this and see us on YouTube. We do make this a broadcast on LinkedIn as well. So we would love to connect with you on any of those social platforms. I know you all are on those different ones as well. So reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment. If you would like to be a participant in the Business Roundtable podcast, let me know. We continue to have new guests come on the show as well. So just thank you guys. Appreciate you having back on here. Until next time, take care, everybody.
Thank you, David. Have a good night. Yeah.